Very good. Also, now I have the right background. Great to have the opportunity to be here. I'm always excited to speak to you, Naimul, and also meet the Startup Grind community here.
Awesome. Hi, Crystal. Great you're joining from Madrid. Greetings from our sides as well. Thomas, let's start with you and your background. If you want to dwell on that, it'll be great to have some perspective there. And then we can go into our main discussion.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So as everyone here, probably I'm addicted to the startup world. I've spent now 12 years in the startup world. I started in Munich. That was where I first heard about startups. I was at the Technical University in Munich. There was something called Unternehmertum, which is the entrepreneurship center at the university. And I started my first job there as a manager of the entrepreneurial network, which was very much in its infancy there. And we tried to find alumni of the university who had already started a company and asked them to share their knowledge with PhD candidates, students, assistant professors who were thinking about starting a company. And basically, I always call that my free MBA. Because I was allowed to sit in on these mentoring sessions, and I learned a lot from just seeing how basically the experienced entrepreneurs in the Munich area were teaching the younger guys, or mentoring, not always teaching. Well, you know how it is in mentoring. Sometimes it's more teaching than actually conversation. But we also got better on mentoring over time. And so I got addicted to that startup world. I continued my journey to join Microsoft Ventures afterwards. There I was leading the German program for startups. We had an accelerator in Berlin, and we had the German-wide program where, for example, I worked also together with our French colleague, who now is the CEO of Station F, Roxanne. She was my colleague at Microsoft back then. And you see like how things are connecting and evolving. And I had the wonderful opportunity also to see some M&A activities of Microsoft. We bought some companies, some nicer ones like Wunderlist, for example. Actually, it was also that the team then joined the Microsoft team in Germany, and we kind of onboarded them here in the company. Tried to find a role for let's say crazy founders going into a bureaucratic corporate like Microsoft, bringing them in there, trying to find how this can work. That was very interesting. And then after some time, I joined the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, which is a mouthful. It's in short, you can say EIT and EIT Digital specifically. There we build up a fund for Southern and Eastern Europe. So I was leading a program that created both accelerators in emerging markets in Europe, and as well as a fund that invested in early stage startups. I did that then for some time. Was a lot in Estonia. I was a lot in Greece, a lot in Portugal. There's actually 7 countries that we worked in, invested in some 30 companies. And yes, after that, I decided, learning so much about different ecosystems, it's time to make that my profession. And with some others, we created Deep Ecosystems, which is a company that specialized in the buildup of ecosystems. And since more than 2 years now, we are running Deep Ecosystems. And I will probably talk more about that in a minute as well.
But awesome. You have your hands full with startups and the ecosystem. Love what you said, addicted to the startups. So that's a very good description. And you have been on the academia side, you have been on the mentoring side, and then you talked about Microsoft Ventures, M&As, and then EIT's journey. Something that I've had experience also of is blending the crazy founders with the bureaucratic corporates. I think there's a huge opportunity there, not only for startups and startups usually the more I interact with around 500 to 700 founders every year. So founders are usually not thinking partnerships. So they're generally thinking that, okay, I have a great idea. Now I need a bag full of investment. Okay. But that partnerships point is generally missing, at least in the Nordic side. So I think that's great insight that you're bringing in and your experience from the EIT side. Question, how did you become interested in the ecosystem side and not startup side? Like, if we can go there.
Yes, that's a good one. Yeah. So I have a very different background than, let's say, business education. I didn't study business. I studied politics. I studied economics. So more the macro level. And coming into the startup world, I never fancied the firm level analysis so much. So I always felt like looking at the talent of the founder as the main decision point or the main driver of success, I was skeptical. So I never really believed that it's about the individual so much. Sorry to say that.
Okay.
But I don't think that one is so much better than the second one that it is justified that one becomes a unicorn and the other one not. I don't grant them necessarily that achievement. I think what founders do is they ride waves. They ride waves to the top. And if there is a wave, there's a couple of people that are knowledgeable and talented enough that have the right resources at the hand. And then they get on their surfboard and they ride that wave and they become tremendously successful. And of course, they have talent, no? But there's also others who have talent where just the mix didn't come together in the right spot. And that's why they didn't become these phenomena of entrepreneurs. So in that, that doubt I have, especially when talking to founders and also seeing how things evolved, that led me to the question, okay, what can we learn from what I studied from political science, which is a lot about managing systems, understanding how actors collaborate, even though there is no hierarchy, even though I cannot tell you what to do, somehow we work together. These questions, that's what we talked a lot about in political science. And so I took that a notch up and was thinking about how does that affect the startup world. And I felt like a lot. There is actually quite a lot you can transfer. And what we realized is that the single most important reason for a startup to become successful is the system in which they are embedded. Okay. If there is no ecosystem, the chances are very dim for them. So that's why if you start in the Silicon Valley, you still have better chances to become a big startup than if you start somewhere else. And I'm sorry to say that again, it is just like that. Of course, that doesn't mean you cannot make it from somewhere else, but statistically, of course, most unicorns start from the Bay Area. Okay. Or move at least to the Bay Area.
So, okay, given your experience, because you have also worked closely with startups when you were doing the M&A situation with Microsoft Ventures. How is it different working in building a startup versus building an ecosystem? Is it something two very different things like poles apart? Or is there something which is kind of converged together, but there are some moving parts which are separate? And number two, is one side more difficult than the other?
Well, let's say the problem with the ecosystem building is that it's not much appreciated. So in the end, when I say that ecosystems are the single most important factor for startup success, in terms of the payout for your work, it's the least appreciated, right? So as an ecosystem builder, you're not an investor, you're not a startup founder per se. So how do you participate in the success you help to create? And that's the big trouble ecosystem builders are in. And that means that there's a lot of hybrid situations. So you become a co-founder, you become a shareholder, you become an investor. So you try to be involved in the success as well. So that's often the survival strategy of ecosystem builders, because we don't yet have a mechanism that gives like a participation in the success of startups to the ecosystem. There's most of the time it's just like goodwill and philanthropy. So if you are a successful founder, then you start something like Klarna, you create a foundation like Norsken. So you give back and you pay someone to run that foundation for you. So, okay, so the ecosystem builder now is CEO of the Norskin Foundation and gets paid. Okay, good. But it's not that they participate in the success of Klarna directly. So that's what we observe.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so you asked, like, is it the same? So when I build an ecosystem and I build a startup, is it the same? On the first look, no. As a startup, you have management tasks, right? So you need to manage a company. A company is defined as hierarchy. You need to hire people. You create processes. You as the CEO and the board and your managers, you decide how things run. And if you do this cleverly, you run an efficient company and you manage to overcome challenges. So you have the management task, clearly management tasks in one company. As an ecosystem builder, you're confronted with a situation in which you have no authority over the others. So I cannot tell Naimul to do something. I cannot tell Naimul to invite me to this talk. I must hope that somehow he finds it beneficial that I join this call and speak about what we do, right? Which then helps the ecosystem to grow. We don't have authority over the others. And that's a basic difference. However, we see that founders realize that the management of their company is not all that they should be doing, because their success depends on a system. So that means the founders need to go out and use their charisma, use their resources they have to forge partnerships, to create situations in which the market that they're trying to grow is actually starting to move and others are helping them, etc. So this co-evolvement of the market is really ecosystem building at its finest. And a lot of entrepreneurs have understood that. They might not call it like this, but when you analyze it, you see that they are going beyond running their company and create this systemic approach where they say, if we all succeed, if the whole market moves up, my company will also surf on the wave to the top. And if the system doesn't grow, I will also struggle, no matter how clever of a manager I am.
Awesome. I think you bring in a lot of interesting points. You're blending founders and the companies or the startups itself and the ecosystem. I think if we can separate it, I'm trying to create a mental map here. So individual, let's say, is an amalgam of billions of cells, atoms and everything, but they have an individual voice. So a person stands for something. It's easy to stand as a person for something, as opposed to when you move to a company, suddenly that's several individuals. So communication, alignment, all that becomes a challenge. And then you move to a third level, which is ecosystem. It's a huge mass of all these individuals and companies together. So yes, it becomes a herd or a mass to drive forward. And then the question there is that, is there an eventual voice? Who controls the ecosystem in your experience? If you want to make a change as a startup entrepreneur or as a person or as a thought leader, where should you kind of penetrate an ecosystem to do that? Who holds the power in an ecosystem?
I can say something clever now, like you see that an ecosystem is working if no one person can control it. So that would be probably the clever answer. Yeah. Okay, so let's say the ecosystem is it's not moving in one direction. So you cannot imagine an ecosystem as a thing like a company that has like a head that says we're doing next year's plan is to increase membership by X amount. That doesn't happen. So the ecosystem is a set of rules, informal and formal. It's different actors with their incentives, their interests. They compete, but they also collaborate. You know, the ecosystem is a system. I would say it's best described by the relations between actors rather than the actors themselves. How can you intervene in an ecosystem, or let's say even build an ecosystem? And I think you need to put that perspective on that you're trying to build a system that works by itself without your doing. So you don't need to push all the time. Okay. So imagine a market. Maybe that's the simplest form of an ecosystem thought. If you want to create a flea market, you will set up some rules. You will create a space. You will make advertisement for it. And then you will invite people to come there and set up their little tables to start selling things on the flea market, right? So when you put that perspective on, you're creating a system in which people are doing things that you don't control. You set boundaries. You say, like, you can't sell, I don't know, weapons. You can't sell, we are not a flea market for books, so books are forbidden. Okay. So you set up some rules so that you control the system somehow. But if people are like on the flea market, like super active and speaking out and promoting their stand, or if they're all very quiet and just waiting if someone comes along, you don't control that. That's their own choice. And I think that perspective is okay, I'm creating a system, and then I hope that that system helps me also lift up my own business, because maybe I'm an antique seller, and the market will bring in new customers for me as well. So it makes sense to work in this direction.
Very interesting. And I think as ecosystems evolve, it also becomes a question of, because I've seen, because we have all seen, like, ecosystems can be laterally developed. Like, of course, these are geographical ecosystems. For example, Stockholm versus Helsinki ecosystem versus somebody was writing here, Oslo. So there could be a geographic way of doing it, but these could also be verticals. For example, we have impact ecosystem, fintech ecosystem, and that then becomes, and there might be more ways, like deep tech could be something which cuts across several verticals and kind of runs as a thread through several verticals. So very interesting discussion. Like, I love it. I think we can come back to the entrepreneurs side of how they can build ecosystem projects slightly in the talk, but let's go a little bit into deep ecosystems and learn about what's the vision or mission or the big idea behind your organization. What are you doing? Yeah.
Yes. So deep ecosystems is an accelerator for ecosystems. We're not accelerating startups, but we're accelerating ecosystems. The idea is that we can democratize innovation by bringing these capabilities of how you create an ecosystem into all the regions in the world. And that we do with the form of an accelerator. So the accelerator is probably the most active community of ecosystem builders worldwide. We bring together peers, they join a cohort, they have their initiatives in their locations, they come together on an international level, they exchange on creating these ecosystems at home, but with this international connection. They forge new partnerships, they exchange resources, they also rely on tools and capabilities that we as Deep bring as kind of the center. And then they go back and create the ecosystems where they support startups, where they support innovation at home. Deep Ecosystems does that now for 2 years. We have supported some 35 projects in the last year, and we already raised 1.2 million for these ecosystems. So it's not for the startups, but it's for the structures that will support startups in all the regions in the world. So far, we have these 35 projects. Our goal is to get to 500. There's always a magic number, 500 startups, 500 ecosystems. So we want to help 500 ecosystems to emerge around the world and help them to raise funds for the creation of these structures. And our individual goal, let's say for Deep, is to kick off these ecosystems by raising 60 million for these ecosystems.
Awesome. And I see in the background next to that plant, that Deep Ecosystem logo and the Deep Ecosystem branding as well. And why the word deep? I don't know. There might be a thought, there might not be a thought. Yeah.
About the name, yes. So we're very proud of the name and the logo as well. So we think we were very clever when choosing that. So Deep, of course, the idea of Deep is that ecosystems are very complex. It's not the first thought that you have. If you think about startup scenes, you think about unicorns, you think about founders, you think about investors, but we think that just scratches the surface. If we think what is below that, what's really driving the success, then we need to go deeper. No? And so we came up with that name Deep for us. Also, it affiliates nice with deep tech, etc. So we like that. And then the imagery that we use is the deep sea, no? Because our accelerator is called Deep Startup Ecosystem Accelerator, in short, deep sea. And so all the images are under the ocean, are also the octopi and the tentacles and so on. So, and the logo here, basically, that is the idea is that it looks a bit like a kraken, you could say. And the bubbles also represent the many different ecosystems that we're supporting and how they are somehow playing together. So we're very proud of that. Thank you for asking. Finally, I could tell it.
but that's great to know. Now, where are you housed primarily as an organization, and how does the course team structure, or how does your functionality look like?
Yeah, so we're based in Munich, in Germany. That's where our headquarters is. Actually, the activities started in Italy. So we had founders of a, let's say, a precursor organization that started already sometime around 2016. That was in Italy, was a non-profit. It was founders, Italian founders mainly, that lived all around Europe and said, we want to know what's happening in the startup scenes around Europe. And so that's how everything started. And then Deep Ecosystems, when we started this based on what we did before, we put it to Munich because I was there. The team is therefore very international as well. So we have 5 co-founders that come from different countries. So we have Italian, we have Chilean, we have German, me and another one. So we are quite international, and our team is also spread out a bit. So we have teammates in Italy, where we have also a small office, and then we have here in Munich, we have in Frankfurt, and actually one of our co-founders is living in Ecuador. So we are quite international.
Okay, great to know that you have international footprint as well as a team structure. I'm very interested in knowing, because you mentioned that about 35 projects and taking it to 500 projects. Now, that's a very interesting unit to know, because if you are a venture capital fund, you are talking about startups as a unit, because we invested in that, but you are talking about projects. Can you explain that? What do you exactly mean by projects? Are these startups? Are these individuals? Are these organizations? Like, who do you support? Maybe that's the first part of the question. Yeah. And second part is how?
Yeah. So we normally work with organizations that are not the classical startup. So support organizations, ecosystem support organizations is the technical term that encompasses, for example, community builders, which often are organized as nonprofits, or for-profit event organizers. We have innovation agencies that are more on the consultancy side. We have grassroots movements that are more like a loose connection of people that don't even have sometimes a legal entity yet. We work with universities. We work with foundations. We work sometimes with municipalities and local, the Invest in X, as we call them often, the economic development agencies on the local level. So we have like all of these kind of actors. The bigger term is called ecosystem support organizations. There's thousands of them. It's like really a big market. So, I mean, when we analyze this, you have like per city, small sized city, you have like between 40 and 100 organizations in even smaller scale cities. So it's a huge amount of organizations working in this sector. And what we realize is that they are not often as, let's say, professional, not as directed towards being really effective in what they do. So what our role is really to deliver them the back end that they need to create an ecosystem. And that is through our accelerator. We basically onboard them and train them on the ecosystem building, let's say, mechanics. And then what we provide, a bit as a franchise system, if you will, is tools and capabilities that they can deploy locally that normally they wouldn't have. So that starts with data analytics, market research capabilities, analytics capabilities. They are often not present in these small organizations. So what we have as a central, let's say, central organization, we provide a research team and we provide data and analytics possibilities. The same comes when, for example, when we talk about scouting. Often local organizations want to offer services to SMEs and corporates who could pay for innovation services, but they are not. They don't want to look at the 5 to 10 startups that are supported by the local incubator, but they say, I need also access to international top startups. Again, the local player couldn't give that access, while an organization like Deep Ecosystems can provide that kind of overview and access to all the local organizations, so they can locally be a bridgehead into the international startup scene. And so the list goes on. We build capabilities at the center that then are used by the nodes to build their business. And we are in the back. So Deep Ecosystems doesn't go out and sell something directly. So we are basically empowering the ecosystem builders to be successful and to make a living from ecosystem building, because that's the basis for impact. If you cannot pay yourself, how can you help others?
Okay, great. Thank you for a very deep perspective on that. We have a couple of questions popping up here. Let's see. We'll start with Monique. I'd be curious to hear if you have any experience with building ecosystems around technologies and topics like sex tech, femtech, especially sex tech that is still very stigmatized and censored.
Yeah, that's a perfect starting point. Thanks for that question. So especially if you are a bit of an outlaw, you have a perfect starting point for an ecosystem, because you have a small group of believers, let's say, that will be willing to join forces with you. And especially in the beginning of an ecosystem, it's important that you create your manifest, that you create the rules by which the ecosystem should work, that you have like people you can really trust. Because as you see, when it grows bigger, there's many actors that want to influence the ecosystem, and suddenly you are not so much in control anymore. Of course, in the beginning, your impact is smaller, but you have more say in creating what you want to be your community and your actors that you want to involve. So that's good. So one experience or one question that you raise with that is as well, is an ecosystem always regional, or can it also be international based around a vertical? And what we see is there's always a regional dimension in everything, because people are just bound to the places they are. It might not be always completely limited to the city you are. It might be a bit bigger because you have, like, for example, that sex tech or femtech focus, and you say we are getting together as a group or as a community across borders. Can work, yes, but still it will not be completely global normally. So you always have some kind of regional boundness, and that's okay. So you can define your ecosystem regionally and vertically.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. Leeson was here from Norken a couple of months ago. I think it was in December, and Eric was here a couple of years ago. And so Norken has started defining itself as an impact ecosystem. So that's also interesting. Founder Institute defines itself as a pre-seed startup ecosystem. So I think I've seen in the last few years that certain global, how would you say, actors in the startup space or ecosystem space are also starting to position themselves as branded ecosystem. So just a point over there. We have another question coming in from Sarah, and that is, how do you make money of this? Normally accelerators taking shares in returns from the startups they accept. How does Deep make money? Yeah.
Yes, we do so as well. We don't take shares in terms of there will be an exit at some point, but we take shares in the success that we create. So if the ecosystem projects raise grants and funds, we also have a share in this. And that way we have a complete alignment with the success of the project. So we have skin in the game, as with a startup accelerator. We support them to be commercially viable, and then we participate in this. And the good thing is, the more success they have, the more they can give back to, let's say, the community, the more services can be developed as well, that they in turn will benefit from again. So there's a mix between like a investment model with success fees and an association model. So if they grow, they can renew the agreements and say, like, I want to stay longer.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas, for the clarity. Sarah, I hope you got your answer, and Monique, I hope you got your answer. If there is more clarity needed, please write here, and others can also put up and pop up questions here. Hannah has a question. Would you please share one success case company that Deep Ecosystem helped with and are proud of? Or initiative. So in your case, company, project, initiative, however you define it.
Yes, so there's also some lists of success cases on our website. Maybe now just is very recently, because we won an EU grant that just started 2 days ago. So it's a social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Romania that we helped to create. It's called Consolidate. So consolidate with D and then an 8 as a number. And basically it is tapping into the potential for social entrepreneurs in Romania using private donor funds. The special situation in Romania is that you have a relatively weak social security system, and you have a high willingness of Romanian citizens to become private donors. And basically, this was not used for social entrepreneurship until then. So the idea was to create an ecosystem around acceleration, crowdfunding, and awareness campaigns to enable more social entrepreneurs to create actual startups in Romania, and start to build like a community around that. So that's working very nicely. We have our partners locally, so we are supporting, we are in the back. What they are doing is they have run several accelerator programs by now for social entrepreneurs. They have launched a crowdfunding campaign, a crowdfunding platform actually, and now also have secured EU funding to grow that further.
Okay, awesome. We have 2 more questions. I'll continue with a question or a follow-up question from Monique, and then we'll come to Lucas. And then there are a couple of other things I wanted to discuss to progress our conversation. So Monique says, yes, she'll be interested in continuing conversation, so we can connect with her on LinkedIn. But she's also curious about hear more about accelerator program for ecosystem builders. Do you have any current programs that are open? I know you have a Stockholm program. So how does that go?
Yes, so currently we have 2 programs running in parallel. It's our global program that was open for everyone. And we have a focused, verticalized program together with the city of Stockholm. And here we were looking for impact ecosystem builders who create initiatives to create the impact ecosystem in their places and want to connect that with Stockholm. So Stockholm being positioned also as an enabler and as basically a destination for impact ecosystem builders globally. So we have some 13 projects running in there. Applications was also quite nice. So we had some 80, 90 applications for these programs, and we selected 13, and now it's running. The next programs, we are now in the planning phase for them. There will be another program this year for sure. So second half of this year, there will be another global program, and that will be open again. And then I think 2024, there will be something focused on social entrepreneurship. As I was just explaining, that was one of our success cases, and this topic we want to double down on. So we will have something on social entrepreneurship as well next year. And of course, there can be more. So
Awesome. I think you guys have very interesting projects in the current ecosystem. Program. I recently mentored a very interesting project, Contact Collective.
Mhm.
Yes, I mentored them day before yesterday. Very interesting idea. They currently have a collaboration with Impact Hub. So very interesting. So these are really, really good. If Thomas is saying about these projects, these are awesome social change projects, which you can see in the Stockholm Impact Accelerator that you're running with Invest Stockholm. We move to our next question. Lucas has a question. Who is your typical client partner? Individual, local animators, NGOs, municipalities, investors? Do you also provide tech communication platform? More about your model. How much do you charge for implementation, maintenance of your system? So these are like 2, 3 different questions, I think. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, the first one I think I answered, and also
Mhm.
he lists most of them.
Yeah.
So they are already in the question. So maybe I can just say yes. Those, of course, there is a lot of entrepreneurial initiatives in our programs that are more on the
Mhm.
grassroots. So new NGOs, new small companies, new community organizers that want to build something up.
Mhm.
So that's, of course, a large part. But on the other side, we also have like the top-down approach where we have larger partners that say, I want to do something for our community. Maybe I'm a foundation. I have the Nordics as a reach, and I want to develop more innovation capabilities in the Nordics, and I want to support projects from our region. And then they send us their projects. And so they can also be customers of ours, if you will. And the second question, do we provide tech communication? Yes, indeed. So as I said, we want to help these ecosystem builders to have everything they need to build an ecosystem. Part of that is international visibility. So we have the Startup Heatmap platform, which is a data platform on ecosystems. So that's something where we help them with visibility as well on that one. But also we try to position them with other media and give them access to channels where maybe they wouldn't be invited themselves. So if that's like, if journalists look for interview partners, we try to broker and position our guys. And that's often something that we can do very nicely. And the journalists are lazy. They like to say, hey, do you have someone that can give a quote on this or that? And then we can point them to the right one. How much do
Awesome.
we charge? That one, I don't know if that applies to us. So um, we're not charging, let's say, a subscription fee for being part, but basically we have an agreement as an investor would have with the project, and so that maybe doesn't apply.
Okay. I have 2 questions. One is you already mentioned Startup Heatmap, and we can probably go into that slightly later. We'll first pick up Lucas's follow-up question, and then I have a question about the projects. So Lucas is saying, who is ideal partner from your perspective, biggest chances of for mutual success?
Mm-hmm. So we have several criteria that we have in our selection. I think the biggest criteria is you want to make a living of ecosystem building. So that commitment is, I think, super important, that you say, I want to build a career in this, and I'm serious about trying. It's not a hobby for me, because there's a lot of ecosystem builders or community builders that do this as a side, and they never expect any commercial revenue from it. And that's not such a good fit for us, because we want to help you to be commercially viable, so that you can have impact in the long run. And that would be a knockout criteria, I would say. And of course, if you have already some experience in this, and if also there is maybe an organization already established, that is helpful.
Awesome, awesome. Before we move on to Startup Heatmap, I had a question, like for entrepreneurs or ecosystem builders who are here. If you have an idea to go ahead and make a change in the ecosystem, or if you have a project idea, what's the first step or the first couple of steps you need to have in mind to move with your project idea?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we try to look at the vision first. Well, that's easily said. So basically, we try to understand the system in which we're operating. So the first step that we're doing is not just go out and do something. So if you compare that to the startup method, you would say, don't focus on the product, focus on the challenge. And that's exactly the same in ecosystem building. If you just go out and say, I want to organize a meetup, let's do it. Here's a room, here's some pizza, and I invite people. That might be nice, but we don't know if that's actually needed or if it helps anything, etc. So we try to understand, why are we doing this? What is the problem in the ecosystem? Where can we actually create the most bang for the buck? And that's why we analyze the ecosystem first. We have some tools for that. It's also a data-driven exercise. So we try to find that vision that really relies on the biggest leverage we could have. And sometimes this can be that we create a community, but sometimes it also means that we need to do a campaign for advocacy. We need to talk to politics sometimes. Sometimes it means we need to partner up with corporates. Sometimes it needs to be an accelerator, sometimes a conference, sometimes this or that. The tools are interchangeable. Actually, the tools are not magic. So we have the blueprints for all the things you could do, but the important thing is that you know what you're aiming at. And everyone can create an accelerator. You just go to the internet and download an agenda for an accelerator. You get everything there. But why do you create an accelerator?
Got it. Let's move to Startup Heatmap. If you could tell us what that is, because that's also an identity that you have if you go on the website. So we're very curious to learn about that.
Yes. So the Startup Heatmap is part of Deep Ecosystems. It's our data platform. It's kind of the window in what we do. It's also our legacy. The Startup Heatmap was there before Deep was there. And it started with the analysis of startup hubs in Europe, saying, where are things happening? Where are founders moving? The platform is driven by a survey that we run every year. And it's driven by data that we collect from third-party data providers. And we show the world what's happening in the various cities in Europe in terms of startups. So as a founder, you can go to the Startup Heatmap and you can look, what is maybe the next place I want to visit? Where's things happening? How much funding do they get in that city? How popular is it among founders? What is the salary cost there, etc. So you find like all of that info. Yes, and it's a cool platform. Should I show it?
I think it'll be interesting to see. I think
okay. Yes, here it is. So basically, the Startup Heatmap Europe is answering the question, where are the best startup cities in Europe? You see here, you can search for any kind of ranking that you want. You have here some highlight cities that we just selected for some reasons. And you can browse. If you go in here, you can go find cities and have a look at the database. So basically here you would have now the ranking is like an aggregate ranking. London is #1 based on all the the composite index, but you can also see the different scores for subcategories. For example, London is not so popular anymore. It's now only ranked 2 in popularity, and Berlin is more popular among founders at the moment. However, in terms of investment sums, London is number 2 as well, actually. So someone has taken over. In terms of investment sums, Berlin is number 12. So you see there is a bit of a change happening at this moment. So you see different categories here, and you can filter, look around, and then you can also dive into cities more. So if you want to know more about Barcelona, you can go to the city profile and actually find here more statistics, more info about what's happening in Barcelona. So you have some highlight statistics. You see more scores in different data points. You can actually go through here as well and see if there's current opportunities for startups. So at the moment, there's some conferences happening in Barcelona that you can apply for. There's a pitch competition with EU startups. There's like conferences coming up, etc. So you can see what's happening and how you can connect to Barcelona there. Some success stories, more data, and you actually can also find here all the actors that support startups in the city. There's a map where you can find everyone that's supporting startups. And you see here a list where you can go through and find everyone in Barcelona. And of course, also in the other places. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a great tool for entrepreneurs or other stakeholders to explore what's happening in Europe. There's also the map that allows you to visualize various statistics on the map. So here, for example, the bubbles show the popularity at the moment, and the lines also show from where founders said, I think Barcelona is a great place. So the lines show us where most founders come from that like Barcelona. So you can put also different statistics on the map, for example, the amount of funding, etc.
Awesome. This looks data intense and very insights rich. So great place for everyone to look into. Great. We are nearing our discussion, like how it should wrap up. And I had one or two questions, but if we could focus on one of these, for example, right now we see there are certain things happening in the world. There's a crunch on venture capital funding.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation coming in, supply chains are stressed and everything. What kind of projects or initiatives should entrepreneurs be thinking of if they are going forward? Is there a framework, like where can you find a big problem to actually solve if you're an entrepreneur, if you believe in making a positive impact in the world through your ecosystem thoughts or however?
Mm-hmm. You mean like in terms of verticals, or you think
verticals, like, it can be anything, like
should
you focus on a vertical or should you go local and focus on solving local problems? What should be your starting point as an entrepreneur if you want to solve or make change?
Well, let me get my glass ball. So no, I don't know. I don't know. I look at statistics and I can see what happened in the past. And I think it's probably not the case that everything would go linear. I can always say in terms of trend analysis that we do, we have relatively stable trends in Europe now over the last 10 years. So we can definitely say that fintech has been one of the largest trends that Europe has seen. It's super stable, super strong. I would say that's not over. No, and there's of course some crypto also connected to that, but payments, etc. So I would realistically say that will continue for some time. I think that we have in Europe always had a very strong biotech and health sector. So if we look at numbers in terms of sectors, these are the maybe by now unsexy top runners. These will for sure stay on top. Interesting new developments are around sustainability, green tech. Always a big question, what do you classify as part of that? Is that really a new trend, or are we just relabeling old trends, for example, e-mobility and energy? And these startups have been around before as well, and now they are just put into new categories, so it looks bigger. So I would still be a bit skeptical about that sector. We see a lot of dry powder in it. We see a lot of VCs saying that will be the future. If it's the reality, remains to be seen. If you look at the portfolio of the VCs, often what they call impact or green is classical e-mobility, sometimes even health, where I wouldn't necessarily say it's a new sector. So that remains to be seen. I would say AI for sure is going to be huge, is already big, but it will be even bigger. So the very big rounds in that area will come soon, I think.
Okay. Awesome. Thomas, thank you so much for taking time out and taking us through your journey, your very interesting journey in several spaces, and then deep ecosystems and startup heat map as well. A big thanks from the community, and a big thanks to the community for joining today's discussion and talk. We will be bringing up our Nordic Summit. That's the next event. I might bring in a quick AI or an impact or a funding event in between. So I'll let the community know. But the next big thing is the Nordic Summit that we are arranging on 22nd March. Thomas, if you are available, I'll reach out to you. Maybe we can do a quick session over there as well. But thank you so much for being here today. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah.